Welcome, everyone. This is RenaFi's monthly webinar with guests from ADDA. My name is Duane Gordon. I'm the president of ADDA. Joining me today is our expert in community outreach who runs all of our support groups, our virtual support groups. That's Melissa Reskof. And she's our community outreach chair and ADDA secretary as well, and just one of the executives that really makes ADDA the place to be. And we're going to talk about connecting with your peeps tonight, because that's what Melissa and her whole group, an enormous team of leaders, are all about: connecting you with your fellow ADHDers. I've got questions for Melissa. Welcome and glad to have you here.
Very happy to be here with Rick and you, Duane, at this RenaFi opportunity to talk about peer support.
Perfect. And you're the instigator, really, behind the peer. It's all your fault, is what we're saying. The peer support at ADDA has become enormously successful.
It wasn't always. I felt like I think when I went to our first conference where I met you in person in Detroit, my husband Doug had known you from coaching, and so we kind of had a built-in crowd of friends that Doug Snyder, my husband, had made with coaching. And so we had our crowd, we had people to talk to, and we had that sense of belonging and closeness. And towards the end of the conference, I think maybe the last keynote, a woman sat next to me who said she hadn't met anyone. She hadn't talked to or gotten close to anyone through the whole weekend. And that just felt wrong to me, given how much love I felt immediately. And I wanted to find different ways to bring the warmth of the conference, that sense of being with your people, the sense of being with your tribe, to our online universe, to our website, and to people who belong to our organization, which is on an online environment. So that's the beginning of the origin story.
Right. And I love telling this part of the story, because Doug, Melissa's husband, and I were in a coaching group together, and I told him, Doug, you have to come to the conference, it'll change your life. And he said, of course, like any good husband, well, I have to ask permission from my wife. I have to ask Melissa. And so he did. And she said, well, if anybody's life is getting changed, I'm going to be there too. So, so she came, and we had great fun. Okay, so you wanted to sort of recreate that atmosphere of connecting with people all year long, but why? How did we get to peer groups? Was that your first solution, or?
We did try something earlier, which was, would you like to talk to just another adult with ADHD? So not necessarily an expert, a person with lived experience. They were where you could relate in that way. Maybe you could get a little bit of advice, but just being heard and hearing that it's real. A lot of people who get a diagnosis while they're adults, they don't know another adult. So you want to talk to somebody your age. You want to talk to somebody whose experience feels similar to yours. It's nice to run into another ADHDer, but if they're 10 and you're 40, where are you going to relate? So,
plus, it's not like you can recognize them. I always say, when we get a diagnosis, if they gave us a T-shirt, it would be so much easier. That we'd at least know each other, and we could connect. So, okay, so one-on-one I can understand, but when you're in a group of people, let's say that we were a support group. So, what do we talk about?
Well, there's a lot of things to talk about, but really often when people come to the groups, they want to talk about big stuff. I mean, there is the sharing of apps or websites or tools that are helpful, but the deep conversations, the conversations about how challenging it was to get diagnosed. Sometimes people are in, you know, seeing a mental health provider and they're getting a depression diagnosis or some other diagnosis first, and it doesn't emerge until later. And when you have that much struggle to find out why is my experience different from other people's, you really want to find somebody who had the same experience to talk about it. When you're in a peer group and you tell this is how hard it was to get diagnosed, and head is nodding, there's just a different way that that sense of belonging happens than if you say it into a group and they don't, all right, that's nice, it was hard for you to get diagnosed. I went to the dentist and I had trouble getting my tooth out, you know. It's just not, there's a different kind of recognition with the shared experience. And the diagnosis challenge is so universal for ADDers, especially those, you know, diagnosed as adults. And then you'll hear people who were diagnosed 2 and 3 times. Like there's a couple of celebrities who have stories about getting diagnosed as a kid and then getting diagnosed as an adult, and then, hey, maybe 3rd time's the charm. You know, you just don't hear that about other people with different disabilities, like visual impairment. You know, you went to the eye doctor, you have what's considered legally blind, and that's that. You know, you're visually impaired.
That's right. There's no debate over it, or yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Now it sounds like just listening to you, and you talk about, okay, so there's kind of superficial questions about what apps and stuff like that, but there's obviously there are deeper conversations that you're able to have. Now, is this a room full of strangers that you're talking to, or like, how does the group dynamics work?
We really do a lot of peer support best practices at ADDA. We have ground rules. We read them at the beginning of the meeting. They let the participants know what's the way we want you to participate, how do we not want you to participate, like, so, you know, being respectful of other people. But that said, you know, there's ADHD traits. People will have an idea and blurt it out. There's tolerance for that. You know, you're not going to tell you to get lost because of that. So we have these ground rules, and they're very helpful for that reason. There's a lot of people who come and their first time, they'll say, oh, this is my first time in the group. I think I'll just sit in the back of the room and be quiet. But so many ADHDers are verbal processors that I can't say how many first timers I've seen be the star of the conversation. You know, they share their trouble with social skills, and everyone else is like, me too. Or they share their I'm late and I was late one more time and these were the consequences, and everyone, me too. I lost my keys again. Us too.
So it sounds like it kind of makes you feel at home that you're with people who totally get you. So if you do show up late or something like that, so what's the punishment?
Ha ha ha. There's so no problem with coming in late. You made it. You made it to the room. That's the celebration. You made it to the party where your people are. That's the celebration. And we're not about this. We're not about shame, shame, shame. We're about celebrations. And we know for ADHDers to get to a thing, that there was a barrier, that there is a barrier, and getting there, we celebrate. Yay, you made it. You're here with us.
Okay, that sounds great. That's perfect. Now, if it is your first time, and you talk about if you're a first timer and you just want to listen, and then you end up taking over the conversation, which sounds okay. But what if you are a first timer and you just want to listen? Is that okay too?
We are, the peer groups are a safe space. We use Zoom like we're in a Zoom environment here, and only members have gotten the link to be in the room. So the room is safe. We do like, you know, that people just say their name and maybe the city they're from or maybe where they're from, but you don't have to do more. And that's only so the other people, it's not a lurker. It's not an unknown, mysterious person. Just, okay, my name's Joe and I'm from Jamaica. good, excellent, thanks. We feel safer knowing that. And if you want to sit in the back of the room, so to speak, or just listen, that's absolutely, however people want to participate, that's peachy keen, you know? We don't you don't have to do anything.
Perfect. Now you mentioned Zoom, and I know, I mean, we're using it here, so it must be secure. You just hear these stories. So is it the same, like there's no chance of my boss finding out that I'm in this support group if I don't want him to know, or something like that?
No,
Okay.
we don't post anything on Facebook, nothing's, and that's in our ground rules is, you know, how to work in Zoom. Don't post anything from Zoom. We don't record any meetings. And the people have been having trouble with Zoom. I don't want to minimize that, but our members have the link. We are moving towards passwords, but we know how difficult one more step can make a thing undoable for an ADHDer. So we don't want to add one more thing. So when we are with our transition over to passwords, we're going to make them embedded in the link. So you just have to click on the link, and we'll have them so that people who are using their smartphone, that it's easy access. And the Zoom, I know people were having trouble with Zoom, and I'm going to touch wood. I'm going to be a little superstitious and just say, you know, we haven't had that problem. We are prepared for that problem. We have not had that problem. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, thanks. Now, so you seem obviously sold on the benefits of peer support, but I also know that there's actual science backing this up, right? So
there is science. I do have to say my preferred way of learning is to get a recommendation from another person or to hear about it. So like, this is how I like to find restaurants, a good place to eat, good recipes. And so to me, a peer group is an ideal place to learn. I hear what other people are doing that works for them, and then I can, you know, how much will that work for me? Do I need to tweak it? And sometimes people give a strategy like they're a morning person, and I'm not really a morning person, but the other morning people in there will find value when they hear that person's morning strategy.
Right on. And I have a slide here of some.
Oh, the science. Yes, some science.
This is the science. Hope is actually one of the very important things that ADDA offers. And I guess the peer support groups contribute to that a lot, right?
Seeing other people who you could consider a role model, just a little bit ahead of you on the path. You can't overstate how important it is to see that it can be better, to see someone else just a little bit further ahead on the path than you. Okay, I could have that. That's not that far away from me. I could do that. Having hope is, I mean, what else you can't move anything forward unless you can see that it could be better.
Yeah, unless you have hope, you're not even going to try, right? So,
yes.
Okay, so that makes sense.
A lot of people who are surprised when they get into the group meetings. Oh, really? Other people have had the same experience of it being difficult to get diagnosed, or that they're ashamed and they can never go back to a place because they were late once. Oh, you thought that too? Oh yeah, I thought that too. You know, just recognizing yourself and other people, it just is a door opener.
Okay. Actually, that sounds a lot like talking about the acceptance. You mentioned earlier, for example, that they don't get punished or lectured when they show up late, or if they interrupt and take over the conversation, things like that. So, and you're kind of just even hearing other people have experienced the same thing and have made it through. Well, of course, that gives you hope, but just knowing that they had it gives you that feeling of acceptance as well, right?
Yes. To hear other people struggle and know that your struggle and their struggle match up, this is my group of people right here. I just
I'm home.
Just to walk down memory lane. I remember when we were met at that conference, we had decided we'd go out to dinner with a group of people, and so everyone came down stairs from the hotel rooms. We all got near each other, and then one by one, everybody had forgotten something important and needed to go to their room. And not just one thing, they'd come back and still need to go back up to their room one more time. And it's like, oh,
No big deal. That's what we do.
no big deal. That's what we do. Right.
Yeah.
And being in the room with each other, you hear other things that you wouldn't hear other places, like that idea of verbal processing. I mean, I don't think I ever heard anybody say those two words together until I was with other ADHDers.
That's true, eh? When you think about what do you hear about the symptoms? It's impulsivity and hyperactivity, and I don't know. That's about it, isn't it?
Well,
There's a few, but there are a million others, and that's where you're going to hear about them from other ADHDers.
yes. I was in a group meeting just in the last few days where a person was talking about having to externalize all their appointments. Their memory was so bad. Their wife was their memory for where things were in the house, and they had this really rigorous calendar. And the description was, I need to look at it like every 10 minutes, which seems weird. And I said, hey, have you ever heard the term time blindness? And it just, I mean, the sky opened up. There was no name for it for him before, but now there was a name.
Right on. Okay. And so other people in the room, they share their experience. I guess you're learning from that too. That would be probably the social support that you're
Definitely.
right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because if they've experienced the problem, maybe they have a solution. Maybe they don't have a solution, but they know where to look.
Sometimes just hearing other people, especially like maybe you come in and you don't really want to tell all of what's going not right for you. Maybe you've only noticed, okay, I'm having these troubles at work, right? I'm not getting to meetings on time, or I'm not turning my work on time. Things at home seem okay enough. And then you'll hear somebody else is talking about, well, at home, we're having this disconnect where my partner doesn't feel like I hear them. They're talking, and I don't really hear them. And I'll ask them to repeat it, but that kind of causes a schism. And hearing other people describe the stuff, you go, oh, I didn't come here for that problem, but I kind of have that problem too.
Yeah. Yeah. I know in my own support group meetings, a million times it must be that it comes up in the meetings. Oh, that's ADHD too, right? Just so many things. Now, I notice one of the things that you say here is that it reduces stigma.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked about that one. This is the thing with this stigma. It's kind of insidious, and a lot of us have internalized it. Like, we have internalized those voices maybe from when we were kids, where the teacher or our parents thought we were lazy or stupid or not trying hard enough or not digging deep enough. And we walk in those shoes. We're that person who always is going to fail, who's never going to get it together. Talking with other people about ADHD, it takes some of that away. It just does. I feel like it's comparable to the LGBTQ community, where it wasn't okay to be who you are, but once you get in a group with other people and you hear, oh, me too, and it's, look, now that we're all together, it's kind of okay. So the stigma busting, I feel like talking openly about ADHD, learning in the group setting, learning from other people, and hearing, especially people who have some compassion for like their time blindness or other ADHD attributes. Geez, like I'm sorry I blurted that out and stomped on you when you were in the middle of talking. I just didn't think I'd remember it. When you hear those things, you hear this compassion expressed by other people. All these things give us tools to own our own life story, and the power to refuse to refuse to be bogged down in the ADHD diagnosis. Like, it's bad, it's horrible. You know, when you hear other people and it sounds, okay, that's normal in this universe. That's normal when I'm with this group of people. That's normal when I'm with ADHDers.
Right.
It takes the ick off of it. It just does.
It sounds to me like it would be a great place to learn stuff that you wouldn't ask your doctor. There's so much I know about my ADHD that I learned from peers because we can ask embarrassing stuff.
Ain't it the truth?
Right? You're not going to go to your doctor and say, listen, doc, I'm struggling. You know, I lost my keys like 17 times yesterday. It's embarrassing. I was late to work. I got fired. Whatever. And can you fix losing my keys? Well, you're never going to say that to your doctor, but until you find a group, you have nobody else to ask. So, okay, that's cool.
I think there's a lot of knowledge to be gained from reading books, but I feel like, for me personally, it's very difficult to take some advice, some of the things you read in books that are ADHD traits or symptoms or descriptions, and then translate them into a thing that you can do to manage it. And when I hear other people in groups and they've got a solution, hey, so we have one women's group that's for women 50 and over, and they are an incredibly well-educated group of ADHDers. And so there was a woman talking about, oh, I really like to have a protein-ish breakfast. I have like an egg, and I like to eat half an avocado every morning. I get the fats. And I hadn't really thought of a strategy to have a high protein breakfast. You know, maybe I had a cup of coffee, maybe, you know, I had bouts with oatmeal, sometimes oatmeal with protein in it. But when I heard her strategy and it sounded kind of simple, I thought, I think I can do that. I think I could make a hard-boiled egg or some other kind of egg for breakfast, and I could do that. So there's something about hearing it, to me.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the thing that strikes me as when I was diagnosed and as I read and as I learned and talked to experts on ADHD, nobody ever explained the emotional dysregulation to me. That was huge for me. And I guess probably because I would see them occasionally and I could usually keep it together for long enough so that they didn't see me have a meltdown and yell at them. But I've done that to bosses. I've burnt bridges and ruined relationships and gotten fired. And I always tell people, you know, it's not my worst symptom. My memory is by far my worst symptom, or my non-existent memory. But emotional dysregulation and exploding and yelling and just completely losing it has cost me the most. And it wasn't until I was in a support group and another guy was telling his story about how somebody cut him off and he chased the guy in his car armed with a tire iron, and he was going to attack this guy because he just lost it. And I was like, everybody else is going, oh, that's terrible. And I was like, I could do that. That sounds like something that I would do. I didn't, but I could have. I could totally empathize. So that sounds like a great place to learn.
I agree with you. And then when you're talking about this emotional dysregulation, you'll often hear people who are parents of children, teens with ADHD, and they'll talk about that their child is emotionally dysregulated. And I think part of the problem when you're an adult, not only is it not 100% in the symptoms people talk about a lot, but that I think I'm going to lose my train of thought right there. Oops, I hope it comes back soon.
But teenagers are immature.
Yes.
But I'm 57. I can't blame it on that anymore. I've tried.
Yes, but it doesn't feel like it gets mentioned that much. It doesn't feel
No.
like it's one of those things that people talk about, and it's like that forgetfulness or procrastination where it's there. And also, you know, one of the other symptoms that we don't hear that much is this lack of self-awareness and lack of awareness of others. And so if you don't have self-awareness, how are you going to notice that you're not emotionally regulated? Right? You just think, oh, that person stepped on my foot, and so I yelled at them.
Right on.
It takes this other view where you're more aware of external and internal, and you have to get to that place. It's not like it just shows up tomorrow. You know, you got diagnosed, and hey, tomorrow, do you realize you're emotionally dysregulated, Duane?
Well, I mean, no, I didn't. Initially, it wasn't until later on that I began to realize what was causing this, and there were steps I could take to mitigate it. Right. I've got a couple of questions
Oh,
here.
Go ahead. What do we got?
So there's Rachel who talks about being accepted by her peers feels great, but you can't just willy-nilly share your ADHD out in the real world. That comes with a high cost potentially. Like, do people share? Like, if people share with their boss, it can go negative just as easily as it could go positive, right?
Absolutely can go either direction. I think this thing of getting the diagnosis and then wanting to tell people, it depends on your work environment. It depends on your family of origin and whether they're receptive. The thing about coming to the peer group is you don't have to worry about those things. There's acceptance there. And other people can tell you how did it go with their boss.
Right.
I happen to have worked previously at a place with visually impaired people. And so I can speak on that disability as well. And here's my real world example. If I were applying for a job and I look sighted, which is possible to be visually impaired where you're not legal to drive and be able to navigate a room without a cane, without a white cane or a dog, and to look the other person in the face when you're speaking to them, and you could still be visually impaired. So let's pretend you come in, you take your interview, you get the job, but the job includes driving. And then you decide you're going to disclose now that you're visually impaired and that you're not legal to drive. If the job required you to drive, they can rescind the offer without it being without it violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. So the same thing's true with ADHD. If there's some requirement that the employer sees as integral to the job and they think that your ADHD discludes you from it, they're not going to be in violation of ADA. And I don't think it's fair. The world is clearly changing now. It depends on your work and your work environment. I've heard many people where maybe their music or other people in the office ruins their concentration and they can't be as successful or productive or do as good a job when there's noises, and they say, hey, what if I wore my noise canceling headphones? And that accommodation works. It helps to come into the conversation with the accommodation that you're looking for already known, that your boss doesn't have to invent it. And it's even better if you don't necessarily have to disclose, but you say things like, my productivity will increase if there's less sound, if there's less distractions. Could I sit in a quieter area of the room? The more difficult or costly you make it for your employer, the less interested they are going to be. Now, if you're a superstar, you're a reporter, and you say, could I work from home some portion of the week? and it's not going to be a drain on them in any way. They're probably going to go for it. But solving the things that you need, the accommodations or the things you're looking for. So why are you disclosing? Are you disclosing because you'd like to get some accommodations? You'd like to sit in a quieter area? You need help working with Excel. It boggles your mind. Maybe you can find a person who's a coworker. I'll do this thing for you that I'm good at. You do this thing for me that I'm not good at. So making a trade, that's a really good strategy. And being in the peer groups, you'll hear what other people did. We have got a group that is ADHD at work, and people talk about their challenges at work and what they're doing to be more successful.
Right on. Perfect. Thank you very much. There's another question here, and I'm sure this is, there's probably like 20 other people who have the same question. Somebody is considering meds. They don't have meds yet because it's hard to find a specialist and so on. But of course they're looking, and so they want to try meds. But they're worried because, well, if you look on the internet, meds are terrible and da da da. So is that the type of thing that they can talk about with their peers in a support group?
I was in a group that was one of our young adults groups, I want to say in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So everybody's in their late 20s in this group or mid 20s. And here was this group of people who were all put on Vyvanse when it was new. And there's 5 other people in the room that you can say, this was my experience with it. What about you? I thought it was the most enlightening conversation about medication I'd ever heard. Because it wasn't just one person who went, my appetite disappeared, right? Or, I really felt like smoking a lot more, right? Oh, that happened for you too? Now, I'm not saying I know anything about Vyvanse. I do not. I'm not a doctor and I don't know anything about Vyvanse. But I can say if you come into a peer group and you are trying meds or you're about to try meds, that you can ask everyone in the room to tell you their experience, and depending on how many people are there, you're going to get different experiences, different people whose provider partners with them. Oh, well, we were tweaking it, I tried it like this, then the dose went up, the dose went down. We decided I needed one kind of dose for this part of the day and a different medicine for a later part of the day. When you hear how other people are handling, it gives you an idea of what you could try that you may have never even thought you could try.
The other thing that I think that it can do has less to do with medications specifically. There's a lot of stuff. When a doctor starts giving you meds for your ADHD, and I can speak personally here, I was taking it and saying, okay, I stop when it's cured, right? I mean, that's because that's what it's for. You're going to fix me. So if I take this, am I normal? Do I never lose my keys again? Am I never late for an appointment? Do I not get upset with anybody? That's when it works, right? And turns out that no, that's actually not the case. And so how do you know when your meds are working versus whether they're not? And how do you know, is this good enough? And if I start, the meds keep me focused during the day, but of course I haven't slept in 2 weeks. So is that a good trade-off? Things like that. These are all questions that have come up in support groups, right? Because,
sleep, a foundational habit.
Absolutely. Okay. So that sounds like an absolute fantastic place to learn about other people's experiences from non-doctors, people who are actually living through the thing that you're living through too, which that just sounds wonderful. So do we have groups already set up for them at ADDA? Like, how do you get into a group? Do you have to start and then graduate to another, and then, or what? How does it work?
We trust you. We trust you to find the thing that works the best for you. But we have a lot of different choices for groups. When I first started the groups, we kind of had this one group that then got renamed the Beginners, which is kind of a misnomer. It's not the best name. It's a great place to start if you've never been to a group before, or you're newly diagnosed, or you're new to ADDA. But it's kind of like Cheers. There's a group of people who've been going to that meeting for a number of years. They know each other. But you're not going to find that thing where it's clicky. We just don't do clicky. It doesn't work for people who are new to come in and everybody's chatting and you're excluded. We never do that. We make sure people, if you want to talk, will go around and everyone can have an opportunity to share. They can tell what they learned. They can ask questions and source the group. We know that people like being with the community that reflects them the most. So women 50 plus, that might be, hey, I got diagnosed at 45, I'm 46. That still might be the best group for you. If you feel like, I'm under 30, I feel like I'd like to talk to people who are more my age. We have a young adult group. We have a men's only group. We have a group that's African American, Black diaspora. People's experience dictates who do I feel comfortable with. We have a high IQ group that meets twice a month on Thursdays. And let me tell you, I thought we needed Mensa to get ourselves started. No, there's tons of ADHDers who that's their first thought. I'm a smart person. How come it's not working out for me?
Right on.
So
I've had people tell me that.
Yeah,
all my life. They say you can't have ADHD. You're smart. Like, not true. I am smart, but believe me, I have ADHD.
Well, it's not.
Okay.
It's the ADHD isn't about being dumb or not dumb. It's
No.
It's hard to get started. Those are our big challenges getting started.
Right on. Here's just a quick question, and then I'm going to go back and address a couple of others. But do you have to be diagnosed, like by a doctor with ADHD before you can even join ADDA?
Such a good question. If you're joining Mensa, you have to take the IQ test to get in, but we don't do that. If you identify, if you've looked through the literature and you think this is you, or you're a parent of somebody and you'd like to learn more about ADHD or get support in the family, or you're a spouse and you go, look, you guys have that group for partners, I'd like to go to it. Right? We don't check, and we're never going to check either.
Okay. So you can sort of self-diagnose.
You can, and we do have that test. We do have that as a 20 questionnaire, 20 question questionnaire.
Yeah.
Stars.
Okay. There's a couple of people in here who really seem to have twigged on the emotional dysregulation, and they are often faced by people who seem emotionally dysregulated and feel attacked and nervous and don't know how to deal with that. Would that happen in a group?
No, we're a safe space. We're a safe space, and that's in our ground rules about being respectful to each other. And we don't often have to use it, but we will use a timer so people can stay in the 2 to 3 minute share zone. We don't know disparaging comments. I mean, that's in our ground rules, no disparaging comments. So, strategies for self-calming, always a good idea. A pause, just a minute, a break, time to catch your breath. And other people's strong emotions, we react people with ADHD can be
scary.
It can be really scary. Can be really scary. Yeah, I concur.
Okay, but is there? What about if they? I suppose if it's online, they're not going to be attacked. So there's that. But of course, you're right that they're also protected, and we can boot people off and so on. But it strikes me that there are also a lot of groups like the social. Learning social skills group where you can practice standing up for yourself and things like that as well might be
The thing about us is we're nimble. We're nimble. If someone comes to us and says, hey, I have this idea for playing Dungeons and Dragons to build social skills. Do you think I could do that at ADDA? Yes, we think we could try that. Well, we'll
Yeah.
advertise it. We'll get organized. We'll try it out. Right now, a thing that is happening is we have a self-advocacy multiple session series. One of our other board members, Eric Doc Anderson, is presenting this self-advocacy. It was missing. It was missing, and people said, hey, we have a handle on it, and it's not willy-nilly. Docs has experience teaching advocacy in other times of his life. So it's a well thought out multiple session with modules, the whole 9 yards. Some of the other groups that we have, like when we're saying women 50 plus or our beginners group, some of those are more loose. You know, you come in and you're having a problem, whoever's in crisis, the peer support group leader will ask, is there somebody who needs to source the group, who's in a crisis, who needs to go first? So we're flexible that way.
Okay, there's a few more people who have, and they, just to confuse me, of course, they've now gone over to the chat to talk about the different groups. So I put the beginners group link in there. Somebody is saying, oh, what about the women's 50 plus? And I do have that on the little cheat sheet here. So I'm going to pop that in there. And this will tell you, so you see that it's Tuesday nights, the second and the fourth Tuesday, starting at 8 p.m. Eastern time.
We are beginning to have quite a following from Australia. I see there's an Australian.
Yeah, there's a few people from Australia.
And we've got a retirees group. I know it's not 100% a perfect match, but it is people who are have a mostly late in life diagnosis and are looking to connect and talk about ADHD. I know that when you're in Australia, the time is backwards for us. So if we have something at night, it's your morning, maybe it doesn't work for you. We try to mix up the times on the group so not everything's meeting at the same time. We have a few things that meet in the morning, an accountability group, a solopreneurs group that meets in the middle of, what's the middle of my day in the Pacific Coast. And we have a morning group that's an international group that meets on Thursdays. That might be a nice match. We were talking about that emotional dysregulation. We recently had a lecture, an enlightening lecture from Renee Crook, who's my partner in the peer support groups, talking about RSD, so rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, and it's different from when you'll see, I think Attitude had Ned Hollowell, when clinicians are talking about it, they have one way of talking about it. Renee speaks of it in first person, and when she's talking about what can you do to mitigate it, she says like, oh, I wrote a letter to my friend that I had thought I had all these feelings around, and it turned out I made a lot of that stuff up. But only in the asking could I stop being worried about being rejected.
Here's a good question for you, Melissa. Somebody says, is there a 50 plus and beginners group where you're, I guess, a 50 plus beginners? But I guess, which, if that was the case, if you were 50 plus beginner, which group would you pick?
Variety, I think I would just go to one and see if I felt like I was in the right place, and then go to the other one and see if that one felt like a better fit. There are lots of people who go to, like, they have Thursday night free, so they go to all our Thursday things. Like Rick does a peer group on money matters. There's someone I've seen, she goes to that group, then she shows up to the high IQ group that meets an hour later. You know, I think it helps to try them out and see where you go, this feels like the best fit. We meet on Zoom. Some of the groups, the folks say, we'd like to stay in touch and support each other between meetings. So they'll have like a WhatsApp group. That's all voluntary. What I saw happen in those, especially right around the time of the quarantine, the young adults had a Facebook Messenger chat, which is how they stayed connected. And somebody put in the chat in the morning, oh, I'm having a bad day. And the other folks cheered them on. which was just amazing. And then when that group got to be quarantined, they thought, oh, we're never going to be able to get up in the morning and do anything. And they made their own accountability using the Facebook Messenger. So there's more ways to stay in touch once you've joined a group than just being at the meeting, depending on which group you identify most with or feels like it's the group for you.
There's one group that I saw there that doesn't seem like a support group, or if it is a support group, it has a weird name. So I have to ask about that. And that is Pomodoro Productivity Power Hour Plus or something like that. What's that?
It's a mouthful. So this is an idea that's we've been running this group at least 2 or 3 years, and it came from a person said, I wish you had this. So they told me what they wanted, and we made it. We found some other volunteers to run it. And it is an opportunity to practice getting started and to get some work done. So we meet in a Zoom room like this. We do 3 Pomodoros, which are 25-minute sessions. So they're 25 minutes of work followed by a 5-minute break, which you're giving this thing a break for 5 minutes. You might say what you were able to accomplish in your 25 minutes, and then a new, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do with the next 25 minutes? And we use a couple of strategies in here. So we'll all say what we're going to do one at a time in an orderly way. And if someone's having trouble, the person who's facilitating will try and help them get started. So you're not there without a paddle. There's other people ready to help you. And then people will mute themselves, maybe turn off their screen so it doesn't distract. They'll work for 25 minutes, and then the leader will come back, call people back into the room. We'll do a status check. Oh, I never got started. I was surfing the internet. Well, what would you need to do to get started? We had a student in there one time, and she had an assignment and had gone back and done the questions she already had answered and fleshed them out a little more. But she hadn't gotten any further along, so the person who was leading it said, well, what if this next time you promised to do the unanswered questions? That's all it took to help this person get from those are unanswered to answered, is what if you just did that? So we do three Pomodoros in there. So we're kind of using 2 strategies at once. We're using this 25 minutes, which is kind of like a heat. It's like a race, sort of. And then the body double strategy, which is kind of like, if you're at your work and you're working quietly and someone's sitting in their cubicle next to you working quietly, there's something about them being there that helps you work. So that's kind of in a nutshell of the body double. So we use those 2 strategies at once in this thing. We have that every week on Wednesdays for a little more than 90 minutes, because sometimes we have to talk a little bit more than 5 minutes in between.
Right on, right on.
But it's a productivity time. It's a time to be productive and to practice.
Right on. Okay, so it's and that sounds really cool. It's not a support group, except that during those 5 minutes breaks, you are obviously supporting each other. So it is a support group in that way.
Yes, it is a support group because you're supporting each other and being productive. Yeah.
Right on. Okay. 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 So that's perfect. A question I had. So I'm married. My wife doesn't have ADHD. And she alternatively hates me and doesn't understand me. But of course, she loves me, but she really would like to understand me. Have we got anything for that?
We do. One of the, I think like group number 3 or 4 that someone asked me for was, we got this call. I looked everywhere. I can't find anything for spouses. I need to connect with other people who are married to ADHDers. So we're really fortunate. Mike Fidel runs this group, and Mike has ADHD. The people who are coming are partners of people with ADHD, and he can kind of be the stand-in for their partner to answer those questions. Oh, my husband, I reminded him 3 times, and then the last time he told me he had taken the movie back to Redbox, but I know he didn't, but I don't even want to ask him why he didn't. Oh, Mike says, I bet you he was embarrassed. So it was easier to fib than to tell the truth. So Mike gives this perspective of the ADHD, or he's kind of a stand-in. You don't have to be so mad at him because he's not the one who fibbed to you, right? He's not the one who ruined your birthday.
Exactly.
But it's a really fantastic group. The spouses can talk with each other, get ideas from each other. They have a secret private Facebook group to stay connected between meetings. They share resources, what they're reading, what strategies worked with their partner. And after we had that group for a while, it started to be like, well, what about people while you're married together? What about a couples group? So that came into being last fall. John and Monica Hassel, who are Australian coach couple, one has ADHD, the other doesn't. We meet again, I think on Thursday evenings, opposites of High IQ, and it's couples. Some, both partners have ADHD, like my husband and I, and some only one person has ADHD. And it's so much of it is about communication and what did you do that worked, or not hearing each other, but you can hear it when the other couples will talk about something. It's really interesting. It's been tremendously helpful. It's been a big door opener. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Somebody asked the question in Q&A, what does this have to do with financial education reimagined? So that's a good question. So let me tell you, you're trying to figure out ADHD, and RenaFi is all about learning how to manage your finances with ADHD. Well, managing your finances is not something that you do alone, and it's not something that you do easily with ADHD. So you need to educate yourself about your ADHD, and you need support with that. Just like you're getting support with your finances. If you think support with your finances is going to solve all your problems with your ADHD, not even close. And I'd be willing to bet that Rick would agree that even if you got all of your problems with your finances sorted, your ADHD, untreated and unworked on, could very quickly wipe out everything that you've done. It's done it for me several times. So, so that's what it has to do with it. Supporting your finance. When you have ADHD, ADHD gets into every little area of your life, and boy, does it get into your finances. So you really have to work on this while you're working on your finances, and while you're working at advancing your career, and while you're working at improving your relationships. You'd be surprised, but the more you know about your ADHD and how to treat it, the better all of those other things will get. So just as a weird little story, I'll try to tell this quickly, and you may have heard it before, but my wife thinks I'm very romantic because randomly I surprise her with flowers. Now, if you think that I can remember to bring my wife flowers, you're out of your mind. So what I wanted to bring her flowers. I wanted to do all kinds of things. I'm very romantic, except that I would forget her birthday, which really doesn't convince her that you're a romantic. So one year I decided, okay, I need a better approach. And I invented a system for being spontaneously romantic. And I know a system. So February the 14th is Valentine's Day. I don't buy her flowers on Valentine's Day, but on Valentine's Day, I go through my calendar for the year, and every 5 or 6 weeks, I put in an appointment to buy her flowers. Just randomly bring her flowers, and every 5 or 6 weeks that pops up and it reminds me to bring her flowers. So what does that have to do with ADHD? Because I have to develop a system to be spontaneous and to remember to do stuff. And that keeps our relationship together. And if you ever want to talk about something that's good for your finances, not divorcing is fantastic for your finances.
Truer words were never spoken.
There you go. Okay, so
I
And
see it.
Susan says, I understand the relationship between finances and ADHD, but how is this company related? What company?
Oh, well, the Attention Deficit Disorder Association, ADDA, where Duane and I, but we partner with Rick and RenaFi very often because we really have so much in common. We're serving the same population. Often people might go, oh, well, finances is nuts and bolts. I could figure out how to do that. But only when you're starting to work on that will you notice these other things. Oh, what about these emotional drivers of your purchases? What about this impulsivity you can't seem to manage? Where there's a lot of overlap between it. So we love working with RenaFi. We feel like this is an excellent company offering an excellent service that's useful and workable for ADDA members. And we feel like ADDA has a lot to offer RenaFi members for other parts of their ADHD that aren't necessarily their finances.
I love this question.
Rick's got it. Rick put his finger up. So what do you got,
do you want to answer this one, Rick? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know what the other question was, but
I'll tell you in a second.
And ADHD management are just intricately related. You know, according to Russell Barkley, we have 4 times the rate of financial issues. And if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, money is on the 2nd level there. You cannot be emotionally available for your kids if you're stressed over money all the time. You can't, you just can't enjoy life or any of those upper levels of Maslow's pyramid there without managing the money. And so really they're just intertwined. You can't manage your ADHD if you're always worried about being evicted. And if you don't manage your ADHD, you probably will be worried about being evicted. So they're just bedmates somehow, they're just linked together very clearly.
Perfect. So the question I was laughing about, Rick, was the person who had asked about how is this all related said, okay, thank you. And who's Rick?
Who's Rick?
So that would be Rick, who had just spoke. And Rick owns RenaFi. So there you go. And Calvin asked, why are ADHD people poor in finance issues? Actually, we're not particularly poor in finance. We're just poor in planning. We're poor in impulse control. We're poor in tracking details, all of which are intimately involved in managing your finances. And Rick has more.
Planning.
And from our RenaFi standpoint, we teach behavioral finance. It's really about the emotional drivers of our behavior. And I think people with ADHD, myself included, we're blindsided by these things. And we say, how did I end up with this kayak? But something inside of us drove us to that decision. And now I'm having a hard time paying my rent. And I'm wishing I didn't buy the kayak, but I like the thing. Yeah, there's so much under the surface beyond our rational thing. Companies teach budgeting, and 85% of them fail to effectuate the change they want because they don't address the underlying drivers of behavior. And that's a big place where ADHD interfaces with our financial issues, because we're frequently, almost a slave to these emotional impulses that we barely even know we have them. They just operate under the surface, and we need to become more aware of them.
Perfect. Couple more questions.
2 questions in there I'd like to answer real quick. So how many individuals are in a group?
That was one, yep.
That was one. So often there can be about 5, or it could be up to about 15. The people who are running the group will do their best to make it so every person gets to speak. And they seem like they go, an optimal number is sort of 8 to 10. Where everybody can understand. You get a sense of who the other people are, hear them speak a few times. And then I saw this question about underemployed. Periodically, ADDA puts on a group called Job Seekers Club. We'll probably have one in September, and it will be support for when you're looking for a job. There'll be people to talk about working on your resume with, people to talk about interview skills. And so yes, underemployed, we understand. We know that you need that. It's just that it's an intensive group, so we only run it periodically.
Okay, there's another question here. Is this the meeting regarding joining your tribe? Yes, yes it is. It shows it starts at 8 Central and 7 p.m. Eastern, and I think it started at 8 p.m. Eastern and 7 p.m. Central, and vice versa, something like that. Anyway, this is the group, and it's being recorded. So if you missed it, you can catch it on the rebound. Perfect. Okay, and then one last question. With the amount of disruptions ADHD does to a person's life, including additional issues, for me it's depression, addictions, menopause, why is it difficult to be approved for disability? I don't know.
So I don't know a tremendous amount of being approved for disability. I know that each state has got their own regional way that they handle that. And I think it depends on your state. And if you're looking for more help with your state, you're welcome to email us. I think Duane has a slide with our email address. We do have some friends who are came through the Iowa Department of Rehabilitation. I have some friends here at the California Department of Rehabilitation. That's the area that does disability services. So I'm sure it depends on your state, because that's how we do it in the States. Each state has their own set of standards, I think.
I'm going to share the what people say about some of our peer support groups. And we can continue answering questions and talking as we share that, but just so that everybody can see, we're not just making this up. And as you can see, some of them have names and some of them don't. You're always free to be anonymous at ADDA. We're not forcing anybody out.
I like this one. I feel like it goes right with the question that we have in the chat here, which is, in France, where I live, an adult cannot get an ADHD diagnosis. Meeting with this group gives me hope and friends who really understand. So there are a lot of places where ADHD is not a diagnosis, that's a disability.
So people like all of our different peer support groups. I know that many people go to several different ones. They'll rotate around in them depending on what they're working on at any given time. And I know one of the hardest things that we do at ADDA is to get Melissa to stop starting new groups. So if we've got a demand for a group, absolutely, she'd be more than happy to entertain opening up one just for you and your friends.
I did, yes, somebody asked me for a widows group the other day.
Oh, really?
Yes. There was one other thing I glossed over and I wanted to touch on just a little bit further about people wanting to reveal their diagnosis to friends and family and being disappointed. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, I got this diagnosis and now that I'm thinking about my life differently, all these things I did before make sense to me. Oh, thanks, Rick. All these things make sense. Oh, I never understood why I did all these impulsive things. And then they'll say something to somebody in their family, a parent or a close friend, and their friend will say, well, I'm late to everything too. Does that mean I have ADHD? And it cuts that person to the quick, that this person dismissed this giant insight in their life. When you come to a peer group, ADHD's in the room. You don't have to prove it. You don't have to feel less than or unheard. You don't have to convince. Sometimes our relatives are not able to hear us share these things. They're not okay with this kind of diagnosis about mental health. But when you're in a peer group, when you're with your folks, you can feel that you're accepted. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to search around and prove it or research any science. It's just comfortable. It's just okay to be yourself.
Here's a good question that just came up. Is there a cost for the peer groups?
The peer groups are included in your membership. So for a mere $5 a month, which we've set up so it can come off of a credit card or out of your bank account, for a mere $5 a month, you have access to not just one, not like, oh, I think I'll try beginners. You can go to all of them. You can find which one fits you the best. So that's
I just put up, yeah, I just put up the slide. It's actually got your contact information, Melissa, as well. But you'll see there, https://add.org/gift. And you can go there and you can sign up for an individual membership, which is $5 a month, and you'll get the first 2 months on us. So go for 2 months, annoy everybody, poke your nose in everywhere, figure out which is your group. And in 2 months from now, if you decide that you want to stay, then it's $5 a month. And really, you've wasted money on way less interesting stuff than this, and certainly probably much more money. That's cheaper than a trip to Starbucks.
And you get more than just our peer groups, which I think are fantastic. We have webinars that are twice a month, sometimes 4 times a month. Not only do you have access to the live webinars, but you'd also have the entire backlist. So I think Rick's done a couple presentations for us. You could see his previous presentations. We have content from all the authors that are current, like Ari Tuckman, Linda Rogley, Alan Brown.
And we run all kinds of groups on all kinds of different things. Like there's one training group going on right now on self-advocacy. We just finished up the Radical Women's group based on Michelle Frank and Sari Solden's book. We have one coming again on social skills, no?
We do have Carolyn McGuire did a social skills, it's kind of like a lab, a 4-week special. She's going to bring it back in the fall. And that was tremendously helpful. She teaches a lesson. Then you have a coach in a small group, like 5 people, and you try out the concepts. So the first session was reading the room. What does it mean to read the room, and then determine what you should speak about an introduction for yourself, and not overshare and not undershare, but be reading the room and then announcing yourself into it. So that's an example of that. So
actually, that was one too, where they had so many people that they split it up into multiple rooms, right?
We did.
Yeah. So we got more leaders and split it up so that everybody would have a chance to talk and participate. So it's a very I don't know, forgiving, accepting, safe, friendly. There's probably a million more adjectives that we could put in there about the support groups. To get your gift membership, if you're not a member, just go to add.org/gift, sign up to be a member. You get your first 2 months on us. That's plenty of time to, like I said, poke your nose into every group and try out our webinars. And if you want to know if there's value there, well, mostly you'll find it overwhelming. There's overwhelming value there. Rick?
Yeah, just a clarification, but I get the 2 months for free if they sign up on a monthly basis. If they choose the annual, which if I'm not mistaken is $50 as opposed to 5, right? So they're already saving some money. Will they also get 14 months instead of 12?
Actually, I think it's they get 10% off. I would have to check for sure, but I think it's like they save $10, but they
Okay.
get it.
That was
for
supposed to be a
$40.
rhetorical question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But basically, they will save money even if they go on.
They're going to save money either way, and they're going to get so much value that they really should be embarrassed to even ask.
There you go.
No shame.
No.
It's a no shame environment.
We
You can
don't
ask
shame
about
anybody.
your discount all you want.
There you go. Thank you, Melissa, for correcting me.
Just teasing you, Duane.
Of course, I know that. Okay, so that's it from us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.